We use this so the whole world could see the poverty of the black man in America.
Cynics might say that you've got it all. You've got publicity, you've got medals, you've got martyrdom as well. What would you say to that?
I can't eat that, and the kids around my block, they grew up with me, they can't eat it. And the kids that's going to grow up after them, they can't eat publicity, they can't eat gold medals, as Tommy Smith said. All we ask for is an equal chance to be a human being.
United States Olympic winners John Carlos and Tommy Smith ran and received first and third place in the 200-meter race during the 1968 Mexico Olympics. As they stepped up to the podium to accept their gold and bronze medals, they shocked the world by wearing black socks and removing their shoes to protest poverty. They cocked their heads and wore beads around their necks to symbolize lynching in America, raised gloved fists making an arc of black unity, and lowered their eyes in defiance of the U.S. flag during the national anthem, all in solidarity with the civil rights movement. John Carlos and Tommy Smith triumphantly brought awareness to the plight of injustice experienced by people of color in the United States and had a major role in bringing racial equality to the country, but the horrible way that the United States, the world, and the Olympic Committee responded to their silent protest was a tragedy. Elite athletes have used their national and global celebrity to further civil and human rights throughout history. In 1936, Jesse Owens ran in the Berlin Olympics and won 4 Olympic gold medals, challenging Hitler's myth of Aryan supremacy. At the time, blacks and whites in the United States were separated throughout daily life, with blacks often viewed as lower in class than whites by most Americans. The Jim Crow laws reigned in many states, and this only enhanced the amount of segregation. The Jim Crow laws were a series of laws that enforced racial segregation, such as separate schooling and dining. Owens returned to the United States hoping that his win would open the eyes of the American people on segregation. Instead, Owens did not receive a telegram of congratulations for his record-breaking feats, nor did he receive an invitation to shake hands with the president, just like every white Olympian did. 24 years later, female athlete Wilma Rudolph won 3 gold medals in the 1960 Rome Olympic Games. Unlike Jesse Owens, Rudolph did not have high hopes. She told a black reporter, "It's going to all but kill me to have to go back home and face being denied this, that, and the other because I'm a black American." Finally, after much protest, boycotting, and powerful speeches, enough people in power found their moral compass, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed. The act outlawed employment discrimination of race, color, sex, religion, or national origin, but it failed to overcome the majority segregation in the United States at the time. Remnants of the Jim Crow laws were still in place, but in 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy, who were powerful leaders of the civil rights movement, were assassinated. Tommy Smith and John Carlos felt they had to do something. What Owens labeled as misunderstandings, the new, younger athletes called racism. These athletes wanted their athleticism to mean something beyond their own individual glory. They felt that winning the Olympics as a black individual was not enough. Someone had to take a stand for civil rights and address the issue head-on. Shortly after Tommy Smith and John Carlos stepped onto the Olympic podium, most people were offended. People all around in the stadium booed their protest as they walked off the stand. Because they deliberately violated the basic principles of the Olympic Games by bringing politics into sports and by not wearing the correct attire on the podium, the United States Olympic Committee suspended Smith and Carlos from the Games.
I think that this idea that sports and politics are separate is just ridiculous.
Later, their medals were taken away from them. They were vilified by the American public, and they endured death threats stateside. At a press conference after the event, Tommie Smith, who holds 7 world records, said, "If I win, I am an American, not a black American. But if I did something bad, then they would say, 'A Negro.' We are all black, and we are proud of being black." National newspapers and magazines did not immediately pick up on the impact of the silent gesture. Other things seemed more important, such as Bob Segrin's legendary victory in the pole vault. Eventually, America started to gauge the fact that Carlos and Smith's salute was more important than they thought. The event was recast as a selfish movement, and there was a sense that a once innocent platform had been ruined by the insults of 2 black men. The only one who seemed to be on John Carlos and Tommie Smith's side was Harold Cosell.
The rules and traditions of the games were violated by the actions of Smith and Carlos. Doubtless the preponderant weight of American public opinion will support the committee, but nothing is solved really. The U.S. Olympic Committee, in the manner of the fabled village of Brigadoon, appears on the scene once every 4 years. It is in the main a group of pompous, arrogant, medieval-minded men who regard the games as a private social preserve for their tiny clique. They view participation in the games as a privilege, not as a right earned by competition. They say the games are sports, not politics, something separate and apart from the realities of life. But the black athlete says he is part of a revolution in America, a revolution designed to produce dignity for the black man, and that he is a human being before he is an athlete. He says his life in America is filled with injustice, that he wants equality everywhere, not just within the arena. He says that he will not be used once every 4 years on behalf of a group that ignores what happens to him every day of all the years. He says he earns participation, wins fairly, and that he will use his prominence earned within the arena to better his plight outside of it. He says, don't tell me about the rules. The U.S. doesn't dip its flag in front of the reviewing stand, and that's a rule all other nations follow. He's aware of backlash, but says he's had it for 400 years. And so the Olympic Games for the United States have become a kind of America in microcosm, a country torn apart. Where will it all end? Don't ask the U.S. Olympic Committee. They've been too busy preparing for a VIP cocktail party next Monday night in the lush new Camino Real. Howard Cosell reporting from Mexico City.
Because of the way the establishment acted towards Smith and Carlos, more people were made aware of the peaceful demonstration in support of civil rights. Ultimately, many in the United States realized their faults and changed their rules. Today, the United States of America is much less discriminative than it was in 1968. In many ways, their gesture was a catalyst for the changes we see now because it made people begin to think differently about racial segregation and why it matters. In 2016, USOC CEO Scott Blackman invited Smith and Carlos to Team USA's White House visit and asked for their support and ambassadorship as the USOC works to strengthen its diversity and inclusion initiatives.
As a consequence, take a minute to thank some people who paved the way to create that sense that we're in this together. We're honored to have here the legendary Tommie Smith and John Carlos here today. We're honored.
Now, 50 years later, Smith and Carlos have found their place amongst the Olympic family once again, as history reflects on their salute with a newfound admiration and respect.
Their powerful silent protest in the 1968 Games was controversial, but it woke folks up and created greater opportunity for those that followed. And they're now in the brand new Museum of African American History and Culture.
One of the things we have to be careful about when using words like triumph is suggesting that the fight is over.
Even though there is no more obvious segregation now, there are still stereotypes and bias against people of color in America.
Get the baby girl out of here!
50 years after Smith and Carlos' silent protest, civil rights of blacks are still being violated in the United States, and today's athletes are following their lead. Colin Kaepernick takes a knee during the national anthem at the last game of the 2016 preseason NFL football game. He too was not signed to play football the following season. However, unlike John Carlos and Tommie Smith, Kaepernick was chosen to be the face of the Nike advertising campaign, meaning that America is changing and recognizing when people stand up for what is right.
This is America.
guns in my area. I got the strap.